Good morning in the springtime at the conference for the media, for investors and analyticians dedicated to the results of TAURON Group for Q1 2022, excuse me. At the beginning, I will just introduce the host of today's meeting, CEO Paweł Szczeszek, Krzysztof Surma, CFO, and Jerzy Topolski, Chief Asset Management Officer. And my name is Łukasz Zimnok. I'm the spokesperson for the company and I will run today's conference. An important message: the presentation will be carried out in Polish with simultaneous translation into English. After the transmission, you will be able to watch the transmission as a video conference. I would like to encourage you to ask questions on the form on the transmission's website. That's the only form that you can ask questions. Now I would like to give the floor to the CEO. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure to welcome you at the conference of results of TAURON Group for Q1 2022. In my part of the presentation, I will present the general situation of the company and the most important events of this year. And then Mr. Jerzy Topolski will tell you about the market situation and the major investments, and Krzysztof Surma will tell you about the financial results for particular business lines. Let's move on to slide number 2. In this slide, you can see the basic financial data and operating data achieved in the first 3 months of this year. In this period, revenues from sales increased by more than 50%, mainly due to higher revenues from sales of energy, CO2 allowances, coal and gas, which was a derivative of the market situation. The revenues from sales increased, like I said, 50%, but in Q1, the group achieved a EBITDA result of almost 2 billion zlotys. Better results were observed in distribution, RES, production and mining sectors. Net profit was 7% better as compared to Q1 2021. Capital expenditure incurred in the first quarter were 4% lower as compared to Q1 21. Some outlays were incurred in RES area due to green return of TAURON. We're assuming they'll be growing in consecutive years. Investments will be discussed further by Mr. Topolski. I would like to emphasize that we maintain net debt to EBITDA at a safe level, which was 2.6 at the end of March. Pay attention to 13% of production from RES. That's an increase. It was a derivative of good wind conditions in the first quarter of this year. The persistent demand for electricity among the customers of TAURON translated into 3% more in electricity distribution. Let's move on to slide 3. Here you can see some major events that took place until the day of publishing the results for Q1. I would like to start from information about the major process we're carrying out at TAURON, which is carving out mining assets from the company structure. All the works are carried out according to assumed and expected schedule at a good pace, and there are no signs that the schedule should be compromised in any way. By the end of March, we want to close internal preparation for carving out the production assets. We've prepared some processes of changing in ownership structure, and we prepared some change of rules in the support of the shift of and transfer of of our employees from TAURON mining to other segments of our company. We're refurbishing some hydrogen and wind farm products. This will be shifted to a new company, to TAURON Investments, that will be created in TAURON. On the threshold of third and fourth quarter, we should have the assets valued, so then we'll define the transaction terms and conditions. In January, we completed a wind farm construction in Horzno, 8 megawatts. It's the third biggest wind farm in TAURON Group. We also started the construction of another wind farm in Mysłowice. The first stage, which is to be finalized in 2023, will be commissioning 37 megawatts, and we're planning to build another 60. It's going to be probably the biggest wind farm in Poland. On the 8th of March, we fulfilled the conditions of the settlement between Elektrociepłownia Stalowa Wola and ABNR Energia. And in May, we finalized the contract. The contract defined mutual settlements between the partners, between the companies, due to contract for the construction of the unit in Stalowa Wola heat and power plant. In March, we made a decision to conduct a procedure to obtain bids for the potential construction of a steam and gas unit, 400 to 500 megawatts and 250 megawatts of heat energy in Łagisza power plant. We will determine its long-term profitability soon. The project will be implemented only if the auction on the capacity market is positive for us, which will be in December this year. We need to take into consideration long-term contracts for the supply of gas and its availability. In Q1, we completed the refurbishment of a 200 megawatt unit in Jaworzno 3 power plant. We reduced the minimum capacity to 40%. We shortened the startup process and improved the capacity at lower load. In March, we finalized a transaction with the Polish Development Fund, where we redeemed almost 14% of share capital, which was performed according to a contract signed by the end of last year. After this transaction, we have 100 shares in Nowe Jaworzno Group. We have achieved approval by the Ministry of State Assets of application of granting public support, aid for TAURON Wydobycie. All the carved-out assets will be concentrated in TAURON Wytwarzanie sector. So that's what we received in April from the Ministry of State Assets. The aid will involve some subsidies for capacity production. It will increase the capital of TAURON Wydobycie, and the estimated value of these ADDs is over 1 billion zlotys. Some subsidies to increase the capital means that the subsidies will not increase the result of TAURON Wydobycie, but they will contribute to its liquidity. In April, 2 weeks before schedule, we synchronized the unit in Jaworzno with the power grid. The unit achieved its nominal power and it's stable. At present, according to schedule, there are ongoing tests to determine the capacity of the facility and installation. We expect them to be finalized soon. And the last event, on 20th April, we signed a letter with KGHM with respect to cooperation in the field of small modular reactor. power generation technology of the capacity from 5 to 300 megawatts. We want these modular reactors to be an important element in our production mix. This will definitely be reflected in the new corporate strategy. The cooperation established KGHM, I think, opens these perspectives. Ladies and gentlemen, these were the major events in the first months of this year. As for the nearest future, I would like to inform you that we're finalizing work on updating the strategy of the TAURON Group, and it should be published by the end of the first half of this year. And now I would like to give the floor to President Topolski. Ladies and gentlemen, a few sentences on macroeconomic and market situation. I would like to point your attention to some events which are a little bit different from previous years. They will definitely have some impact on the future of the energy sector and our group. As we can see, the GDP indices, PMI indicator, is maintained at a very high level, higher than in previous years, 8.5% in Q1, which tells us that industry will keep developing despite the macroeconomic situation. And if we look at the shift of energy production for industry, we can see there's a consecutive drop since Q2, or actually Q3. Consumption of energy in industry has been decreasing, but on the other hand, the value is increasing to achieve in Q1 2022 18%. So it tells us that it's not due to the volume of production, but to prices, because the volume is followed by increased consumption, which is one-to-one arrangement actually. But here we can see this new phenomenon. So it's worth to note that we'll be probably observing increasing prices of products and services. We can see some stability in CO2 allowances, which is a positive trend. And if we have a look at the structure of electricity production in Q1 as compared to analogous period in the previous year, please note that there is an overall increase in supply of energy by more than 8%, 8.1% to be exact. And the distribution between segments is as follows. In coal, production from coal is almost 7% decrease, 6.9. It's mainly affected by supplies of coal and prices of coal in Q1. It affected smaller productions. But we can see this gap is being filled by lignite-generated production. It's an increase by 19.4%. We don't have to explain it. I think that lignite-fired units are the first to replace hard coal-fired generation. But we can also see gas units where there was like a drop by 8.3%, which is mainly due to the price of gas and problems with gas that result from the war in Ukraine started by Russia. And we also see a very significant increase by almost 70% in the renewable energy sources, which is mainly due to fantastic wind conditions in Q1 2022 as compared to very, very unfavorable conditions in Q1 2021. And there's also a dynamic increase of prosumer dispersed sources of RES energy. As for macroeconomic situation, I would not like to add more information. I think the major things have been discussed. And how it all translates into segments of our group, I think that Mr. Krzysztof Surma will give you more details about that. Ladies and gentlemen, if we have a look. I think the mic was off, so I will repeat. In Q1 2022, we had a significant increase in revenue. In Q1, the revenues reached almost 10 billion zlotys, mainly affected by energy prices, and also another factor nominally was the volume of coal and prices of coal. As for EBITDA, as it has been said, we've reached almost 2 billion zlotys, but it's worth to point to one thing, like one-off events. We had them in Q1 2021, but also in Q1 2022. Both these one-off events were related to our unit in Nowe Jaworzno power plant. The 910 megawatt unit. In 2021, there was a postponement in commissioning. We had some excess of CO2 allowances, and they had to be allocated for the production of 2022, 2023, 2024. And similarly, in 2022, we had some excess in allowances related to lack of production in the 910 megawatt unit in Jaworzno. And this lack of production was due to failure that we communicated about in ongoing reports. So these allowances from 2021 were assigned to an installation of TAURON wytwarzania and allocated to be redeemed for 2022. And in Q1, to adjust the date of redemption and of cash flows, we disposed of some of these allowances, and so the result from sales of these allowances was all more than 400 million zlotys. So it was a one-off event that adjusts the EBITDA. So the repeatable EBITDA is about 550 billion. So it's an increase by 13% if we compare it year to year. If we look at individual segments, for the first time, the biggest share in EBITDA is that of generation, almost 900 million zlotys. But in this segment, what we see is the one-off event result, that disposal of allowances, which generated 405 million zlotys. So if we take this off, if we exclude it, the results are still very good, but the leading segment, like in the previous segment, would be distribution, which generated almost 900 million of EBITDA. So it was a positive effect of all the segments apart from supply, where you can see it well in the next slide. The generation segment, like we said, very good results. It has the major positive effect year to year on EBITDA. All the other segments, it's worth to pay attention to mining. They had a positive impact on year EBITDA, apart from supply, but I will develop on that a little bit later on. If we move on to distribution, our key area in this quarter also showed very good results. The first part of those results was expected because more than 50 million increase was observed quarter to quarter, which is due to increase in the rates, which stems from the price of energy agreed with the president of the energy agency, energy authority, by the end of last year, and then due to increase of volume that also contributed to better results. And the most surprising part is the lower cost of the difference in the balance amount. We had this event of purchasing energy to catch up for the balance, but the volume was lowered, and the estimation balance. This might be a little bit fluctuating, so we'll see how it looks like in consecutive quarters. As for key parameters, some good news here. Just like in previous quarters, all the parameters, quality parameters specified by the President of Energy Authority, Energy Regulation Authority, there's no risk of reducing the profitability by the President of Energy Authority due to not maintaining the quality parameters. Now, RES EBITDA increased by 120% year to year. This increase in EBITDA was mainly influenced by two factors: increase in energy prices and increase in property rights prices. And another important factor was increase in volume of energy generated by wind farms. So let's remember that in 2021, in Q1, the wind level was a historic low. So in 2022 Q1, we have standard level of wind, and therefore there's a significantly better result in volume of energy generated from wind, but also more number of green certificates. As for generation segment, here we have several effects. Mainly the effect of higher margin, which was generated on 200 megawatt units and the 460 megawatt unit in Łagisza. Because in Q1, the unit in Nowa Jaworzno was not operational yet. However, we don't see any negative effect from it, because by the end of 2021, we created a provision for the repurchase of energy under this contract. So even though we had to repurchase some energy at higher prices than the prices at which it was sold, this has been allocated in the provision created by the end of 2021, which was being released together along with the redemption level. Some lower results in heat production, the cost of allowances and costs of prices of coal sped up a little bit as compared to the tariff prices. But in this area, we produced energy at the same time from biomass units, and which gave us a positive result quarter to quarter. We also produced energy in cogeneration, so quarter to quarter the result was positive. We have some positive contribution to EBITDA due to that. As for the transaction for CO2 allowances, these are the one-off events that I mentioned when I discuss EBITDA. As you can see, this effect quarter to quarter is about 43 million. This is the result of one-off events. They contribute positively to EBITDA when we compare Q1 of 2021 and 2022. When we move on to the supply segment, the most surprising thing happened here for the market. This segment felt the significant changes on the market. changes in energy prices and significant changes in the prices of raw materials. So the main factors of decreases quarter to quarter, Q1 2021 to Q1 2022, we can say that the major factor here is the change of the cost of the profile due to high energy prices, and during the day the profile cost increased very significantly quarter to quarter, and it had a negative impact on the result of the segment. Another factor was not full coverage by tariff G, which is due to the profile cost, which is not unified in the tariff. And another thing is the moment of establishing the tariff, which is done in November, and contracting is ongoing until the end of the year. So there's a difference here. And in the last months of the year and at the beginning of this year, we've observed very high prices, significantly higher than the prices established or at the moment of establishing the tariff. And the last factor that affected negatively the result of this segment was the cost of purchase of gas. We had a very significant increase in prices of this raw material that could not be translated or transferred to the retail customers in full. This quarter was negative, but we're hoping and counting on the consecutive quarters to be better due to activities in the sales companies that we carry out. But the results year to year in this segment will not maintain at the same level. We're talking about cleared results. Last year we had the cost plus event that we discussed during the annual conference. So when we clear the result of this event, the result will be a little bit lower year to year. If we move on to the mining segment, here's some positive surprise. It's a second quarter in a row with positive EBITDA. This positive EBITDA was affected mainly by the price of coal, mainly on the external market. There was a huge increase in prices, and it was significantly reflected in the result of this segment. And also, it's worth emphasizing that in Q1 2022, actually all the production was sold immediately, which is completely different to Q1 2021, when a lot of coal mined was allocated as inventory. And the effects of sales of those inventories could be observed in the second half of 2021, and we can also see this effect of allocation of cost that was activated in the balance sheet as inventory. Now it's transferred as a cost to the profit and loss account, and therefore it reduces the result of the segment. However, it's a very good result in the Q1 2022. Like I promised, I would like to tell you about the perspectives, about prospects of this segment here. We have definitely two major factors here. The market factor, which should have a positive influence on the result of the segment. And another factor is the mining and geological conditions. We need to remember that the length of the longwall is limited, and therefore at the threshold of second and third quarter, we'll have to add some equipment down there, so it will worsen the result, but we should see some better result in this area after all, and we're estimating that the EBITDA in that segment should fluctuate around 0 this year. And so it's worth adding here that EBITDA is not affected by potential subsidies, if there are any. They will be in the form of some subsidies to the capital and recapitalization, so they do not have any impact on the segment's EBITDA. The potential impact might be on the liquidity of the segment, but this will definitely result from the difference between current prices and the costs in the segment. So a lot will depend here on the market and the level of prices we observe throughout the year. And finally, to conclude my part of the presentation, debt level quarter to quarter, it increased significantly, but let us remember two things. If we eliminate them, there's no increase. The first event is the redemption of minority PFR shares, in Nowe Jaworzno for almost 1 billion zlotys, and another one is the purchase of allowances of CO2 emissions. All the allowances to be redeemed from 2021. It was purchased in Q1, and last year part of this purchase transactions took place between Q2 and Q3. If we exclude this difference, the difference is almost 1 billion zlotys. If we exclude those two events, the level of debt would be similar quarter to quarter. The net debt to EBITDA, like I said, is at the level of 2.6, so it's at a safe level. And it's due to the liquidity part, but also to the level of EBITDA, drawn EBITDA. We had the effect last year. We had the effect of reversing resolving the provisions for the equivalent of energy. As for debt maturity, this will happen in December this year. We're finalizing a big program worth 6 billion zlotys. We're in the course of negotiations with banks. We're hoping to finalize it by the end of June this year. And regardless of the result of this refinancing, the company has a guaranteed level of financing and liquidity for this current year. So much for the financial part, and I would like to give the floor back to President Topolsky to speak a little bit more about investments. As for investments, by segments, we can see some decreased expenditure in distribution. In the previous in the analogous quarter, it was 457. Now it's 406 million. It's not due to lack of funds, but the situation which happened after 24th of February, after Russian invasion on Ukraine, where we could feel some perturbation, some differences in the workforce, mainly the workers from Ukraine. So there was a shift with commissioning the investments, but it's stable now. The situation is stable now, so there'll be some expenses according to schedule for consecutive quarters. The biggest expenses, which is more than 55%, is the construction of new connections, 210 million, and grid asset upgrades and refurbishment is 183 million. As for generation, we can see minor share of Nowe Jaworzno is 64 million. Last year, last quarter, it was 58. In Nowe Jaworzno, 33 million. It's the effect of a settlement agreement, an optimization program that was included in the settlement agreement. As for other expenditure, there are some expenditure in the heat area, 16 million zlotys, which is the construction of a gas-fired boiler, 140 thermic megawatts, And new facility connections to the district heating network, that's 10 million. And RES expenditure increase according to the green return by TAURON. Last quarter it was 5 million zlotys, and now it's 21 million, related to the construction of 3 wind farms: Piotrków, 30 megawatts, Majewo farm, 6 megawatts, and Mysłowice farm, which should be the biggest of our farms, and the construction has already started, and we have already incurred some expenditure of 1 million zlotys in this area in Q1 2022. In the mining area, it's stable. 67, 69, it's construction of delving galleries and preparation work. In the mining shaft, Grzegorz mine shaft, similar expenditure. And in other areas, it's 50 million, like in Q1 2021. It's related mainly to the construction of the broadband internet as part of the Digital Poland scheme, and the service center, 28 million. So we're according to schedule and according to contracts signed in this area. The other areas include mainly development, expansion of lighting, 13 million. TAURON Nowe Technologie is responsible for this investment. And IT investments, 8 million zlotys. Now I give the floor to our host. Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. Now let us move on to questions. Let me remind you that you can ask questions by use of a form which is available on the transmission website. The first question refers to the Energy Security Agency. What's the schedule of carving out the mining assets? What's the schedule? For a current schedule, we have this press question from Business Alert. As for the process of carving out coal mining assets in the TAURON group, we do not see any signs that there should be any delays. We're according to schedule, third, fourth quarter. Due diligence will start and valuation of the assets, and in Q4 we will the state will purchase the assets. So it's all according to schedule. So that on the 1st of January 2023, TAURON Group starts its functioning and operation in a new reality. Another question: what about mining assets of TAURON in the current situation? Is there any possible shift in the strategy of carving out the mining assets? From WNP question. We don't have such plans. We signed a letter of intent with the Treasury that provides for the potential purchase of mining assets by the Treasury. In TAURON, we have a team dedicated to it. I need to remind you that we require a European Commission consent for it. Another question refers to 910 megawatt unit. How does it work after synchronization? That's a question from Rzeczpospolita. Let me answer this question. On the 14th of April, we synchronized the unit, and ever since that time, the unit has been operating in a stable way. We have some measurement and optimization programs ongoing. We've also halted the unit for 5 days. It was planned and scheduled in order to verify the modernization, the refurbishment of the boiler and coal supply, and there was a positive result, and it seems that all the changes implemented, design changes after the failure were good ones, and we can say that the unit has been operating in a stable way, and we think it will be working in a stable way. And by the end of June, we're scheduling the finalization of all the optimization works that were not completed in the transition period or that required another optimization due to the refurbishment we implemented. And then we'll start the transition period until the end of October. All the PSE and all the use and operation tests are to be completed by then so that it can be fully commissioned. So it all seems that if we take a look at the test run earlier on and the overhaul results during the hold of the unit for the 5 days that I mentioned, between 30th to 18th May, I think it will be shortened, the time for commissioning, but I don't want to predict how long. Another one is a gas and steam unit related question. In the current situation on the gas market, will it persist? Will the situation not change? From the Polish media agency, we received positive offer approval for the Łagisza steam and gas unit, but the implementation in March, but it all depends on the results of the auction on the capacity market in December and market conditions such as availability of gas and the price of gas. It's an important project for us. We'd like to do everything we can to implement it. It's an element of a change of mix in the heat segment, and this is what this project is mainly dedicated to for the mix of energy production for Silesia and Dąbrowa region. More questions. I will, if we have several questions from a single author, we will just ask them one by one. How much % of biomass is combusted in Nowe Jaworzno unit? I will try to answer. The biomass unit in Jaworzno is a purely biomass unit, so we burn 100% of biomass in that unit. What are SAIDI and SAIFI indices for Q1 2022? The precise data is there in the report. As I said, SAIDI and SAIFI are below the indices as specified by the president of the Energy Regulatory Authority. So there's no risk for the tariff. Can you comment on the potential reception of 1 billion zlotys subsidy for the mining sector? In what form and when and how will it reduce the level of net debt? Will the profits in consecutive years be allocated in the assets before spin-off? Maybe I will try to answer. Partly, I mentioned it in the part of perspectives for the segment in the presentation. But actually, we're talking about the maximum values stemming from the major assumptions of the operating program. But actually, this level will depend on the level of revenues of the company and eligible costs. As for today, after Q1, we can see the results were very good. The company did not generate any demand for extra cash or resources, so we did not have to use that subsidy program. So we're not talking about independently receiving 1 billion zlotys, but it's fully dependent on the revenue and cost situation of the company. So that's the first part of the question. And is it going to reduce net debt level? Well, if we were to deal with some additional effect, regardless of the result of the company, it would affect the result of the company as additional funds. But like I said, this receipt of these subsidies depends on the results of the company, because if the results are positive at the level of EBITDA and also at the level of cash flow, they will have a positive impact on the reduction of net debt for the whole group. The perspective for today is to get EBITDA around zero. So if we need extra funds, they would neutralize the negative impact of the mining segment upon the net debt of the company. So we're not expecting any improvement of net debt of the company due to the subsidy. Another question concerns, well, it's a request for a comment on CDS for the consecutive year and the prices of thermal coal. What are the prices we expect next year? Is there a risk of a coal price change this year, and how much? As for CDS, its level depends highly on allowances of CO2 emissions and coal prices and market prices. So we have high prices of energy, that's for sure. The prices of allowances, after a short drop, after aggression of Russian Federation on Ukraine, they dropped, but they're stable, back to normal again. And the last thing is prices of coal. If we have a look at CDS, that's very variable. Even if you have a look at this year, very poor February, very good January and March. April was so-so, May is better, but you know, it's very fluctuating. There's no stable value. These values month to month can change by 100 zlotys even. So CDS would fluctuate by several zlotys, and now it's 100 zlotys difference. So it's hard to predict CDS for next year. The only thing we can say, it's positive, significantly positive in May. But their amount will depend on the level of coal prices. There's some ongoing discussion with the suppliers for the next year. The key supplier for the whole Polish markets, which is PGG, is negotiating prices for the next year. When we talk about the current year, we can see some significant increase in coal prices. I'm referring here to international airport prices. In the last few weeks, we've observed a drop of coal prices. It has some implication for the domestic market. When they see high prices, international prices, they obviously send signals regarding potential price rises to energy groups, including TAURON. They would like to discuss it. So some negotiations are ahead of us, so we cannot tell anything about the risk of price. Another question is about the Energy Security Agency, but I think we've already exhausted this subject. Now another question. The tax on extra profit or extraordinary profits is being more and more popular in Europe. Is the company envisaging the introduction of it in Poland? Well, this tax, I'm not sure if it's like popular all over Europe, but in some countries, yes. But let's remember about the structure of generation in other countries, specifically in those countries where the tax has been implemented, where they have mainly renewable energy sources like Spain or Portugal. In Poland, we're at the very beginning of this transformation and shift of sources and energy mix. So are we talking about any extraordinary profits? I will at this point refer you to the slide from the beginning of the presentation. We're talking about 13% of increase in EBITDA, so we're not talking about any extra extraordinary increase in profits, in revenues. And we are about to face significant investments related to transition of economy, and we don't have that much share of renewable energy sources in energy mix, as it is the case in, for instance, Portugal or Spain. Andrzej Rembelski from PKO BP Brokerage House. Are you going to reanalyze the assets of TAURON Wydobycie due to the situation on the market, or is it established with the state, with the treasury already, and you're only waiting until the decision of the European Commission regarding subsidies for the mining sector? Yes, well, as I've mentioned a number of times, it's all linked to the negotiations with the European Commission and concerning transformation of the mining sector, like in creating a single entity in the coal mining sector in Poland. Nothing has changed here. The analysis of and valuation of assets will be performed, and this will be the basis for the transaction of sale. But obviously we can see some changes in the prices of coal on the market, but it's hard to say if it's a long-term trend, because the effect of long-term prices of coal might change the appraisal of assets, but for now, we do not share this opinion that it's a long-term trend. Another question concerns the situation on the market and the increasing prices due to the war situation, but I think we've already answered. No, maybe let me read the whole question. So now in this situation of war situation and coal prices, is it possible that you withhold the carving out of mining assets? And if not, what's the schedule of carving out these assets? As for the works concerning carving out the assets, coal mining assets, that's something we've already addressed. But I would like to emphasize that these financial results, this increase in energy prices, I hope they are transient. But the idea of the National Energy Security Agency is to allow companies to give them access to external funds to implement the strategies they have in their plans. Even because otherwise, if we have very good results, even in the mining area, otherwise these funds are not available. So there's no reason to deviate from this program, despite better results in the mining segment. Another question. What is the positive EBITDA result due to in distribution, despite higher prices of energy? What's the value of increase of higher volume? And please provide details of the increase of value of the additional estimation. As for the first part of this question, I've already addressed it during the presentation of results of particular segment of this segment. This cost of grid losses year to year is being increased by higher cost of purchase of energy, but on the other hand, we had this lower volume in the balance sheet difference. And there was a positive effect of the additional estimation value, which reached about 80 million zlotys. As for the impact of volume and prices, they actually they were even altogether, and this can have a positive effect on the result of this segment anyway. So what do you think about the future situation, like EBITDA in the distribution segment in 2022, 2023? What factors would support this projection, and how will it be affected by volume and other factors? As for 2022 perspectives, we mentioned it already. We said it would be stable in this area. And the key issue here is that we maintain the volume in consecutive quarters. The volume of distributed energy in Q1 was positive. If we have a similar situation consecutive quarters, then it could be stable with a slight increasing tendency, but it's hard to estimate this economic situation specifically in Q3 or Q4. So for today, we are maintaining the perspective of a stable result year to year in the distribution segment. As for 2023, we're not giving this projection, but the standard factors that have impact on this segment will be the level of WACC, which is due to higher interest rates, but the whole distribution structure. And another thing, something we mentioned during the annual conference, let's remember about the account where we accumulate extraordinary volumes of distributed energy. I mean, extraordinary as compared to the tariff agreed with the president of the Energy Regulatory Authority. So it might have slight impact on the result in 2023. But as for today, 2023, we're not giving the projection for this year. We're waiting for the new model of tariffs for distribution, which is being negotiated. Last two questions. What risks do you see for the EBITDA in distribution in 2022 and 2023? I think we can combine it with the next question. What's the model of tariff for distribution? What's the stage of negotiating it? In this respect, I think we can say that these factors are well known and we don't see any other risks. The first risk is regulatory risk that has been mentioned by President Surma. We don't know the energy transition chart. This is a document that is being elaborated now as part of establishing the model for consecutive years. It is to be finalized by the end of June this year. So we will know the situation only in the second half of the year. We'll see how it affects, how the model affects revenues from tariffs. And another risk is the risk of volume. As you could see, the volume has slowed down its pace of increase as compared to the situation after the pandemic. But, as Mr. Surma has mentioned, we have this regulatory account. It will all depend on the performance or non-performance of the tariff. It will affect it from the regulatory account. We might have an additional increase in price by 2%, which this is the limit, or reducing the price if this has a reverse impact. So in this respect, we're observing or projecting that it will be stable due to the regulatory account, but it's mainly related to the model of tariffs and some major changes in the direction or volume of sources of supply to find end customers. Ladies and gentlemen, if we have not answered all the questions, or if there are some more questions, you can keep sending them to our email, media@ tauron.pl. You know this channel of communication. I would like to thank the presidents for the participation in the conference, and we will meet once again right after publishing the report for the first half of 2022. We will inform you about the conference date in a traditional way. Have a nice day. Thank you very much.